Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you're new to the channel, I really appreciate you coming by and checking it out. Hope you like what you see and what you hear. What we got today for you guys is the story of Teddy Roosevelt. Yes, that Teddy Roosevelt, the President of the United States. Now, he writes a story about a Bigfoot encounter that happened in the Bitterroot Mountains to two trappers that were beaver hunting. Wait until you guys hear this story. This one is pretty fascinating and I can't wait to tell it to you guys. But before I do, I'm always going to show you guys these locations, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you this location where this happened, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to show you the actual creek where this happened. Now, no one knows for sure because this happened so long ago. The incident happened probably in the mid-1800s, and this story was told to Teddy Roosevelt in the late 1800s. So this story is a long time ago, but Teddy Roosevelt thought it was true enough that he would go ahead and write this down and put it in his book, The Wilderness Hunter. Now, if you guys don't know about Teddy Roosevelt, he was a person that would call a liar to their face. So for him to write this story down and put it in his book, that tells you basically all you need to know about this story. So let me go ahead and show you these locations, and you guys can follow along as I tell you guys the story. Okay, so this is the area where this event happened in the Bitterroot Mountains, right on the border of Montana and Idaho, next to the city of Salmon, Idaho, and right here by Wisdom, Montana. Now this mountain range in between right there is where this happened. Now you guys can see the North Fork of the Salmon River right there where it says North Fork, and where it says Wisdom, that is where the Wisdom River runs. It's not called the Wisdom River anymore. What it's called now is the Big Hole River, but that is the river they're talking about. And if I zoom in here, these are the headwaters of the Big Hole River or Wisdom River. And once again, over here at the North Fork, this is the forks of the Salmon River right there. Now, people thought that this was the forks of the Salmon River where it says Salmon, but that's not the case. It's up here where it says North Fork. The Salmon River runs along that way, and then it runs south. So that's the fork of the Salmon River. Now, to be fair about this, I really cannot pinpoint the exact creek, guys, because you see there's a lot of them here, and there's a lot of them with ponds in them, but I'm going to give you probably my top three that I think it could be. The first one's probably going to be Big Swamp Creek, which is this creek right here, and you guys can see all these other lakes that are in the head of it, and they talk about a beaver pond that is in a wide ravine, and you guys will hear that part of the story. And here's that beaver pond that they could be talking about that is in a wide ravine right there. But there's a few other creeks in this area that also fit the bill. How about this one right here? You see this little beaver pond and this wide ravine right there. And there's a few up further north that definitely could fit the bill. You see this is called Big Lake Creek right here. And you see that wide ravine with these beaver ponds in it. So it is really, really hard to pinpoint what they're talking about, which creek they're talking about, because there are so many creeks and ponds in this area. See, there's another beaver creek in this wide ravine. So to be fair, guys, I can't pinpoint the exact creek location. Sorry about that, but I did the best I could to show you at least 3 or 4 where I think it probably is. It's probably one of those creeks right there. Alright, now that I showed you guys those locations, let's get into this story. This one is a really, really good one, and one of my favorite ones, to be honest with you. It's one of the classic ones from long ago, and if you guys know anything about my channel, I put a lot more credence into these older stories like this. There was no social media, nothing like that for anybody to gain any fame or anything like that. So to me, that makes this story a little bit more prone to be truthful. Alright, let's get it. One of Idaho's best known horror stories. It tells the story of two trappers who set out on a beaver hunt in the still remote alpine terrain of the beautiful Salmon River countryside. This portion of the Salmon River is located in the Bitterroot Mountains between the state of Idaho and Montana. To this day, stories of the Sasquatch come out of this part of the virgin wilderness. Roosevelt wrote that the previous year a trapper's body had been found torn to bits and partially eaten by an unknown beast, which left enormous human foot tracks in its wake. Oblivious to what should have been a warning to the senses, these two men journeyed deep into the wilderness remote regions, moving campsite from one creek to another in search of satisfactory places in which to place their beaver traps. Here is that famous story about Bauman from Roosevelt's book. Frontiersmen are not, as a rule, apt to be very superstitious. They lead lives too hard and practical and have too little imagination in things spiritual and supernatural. I have heard but few ghost stories while living on the frontier, and those few were of a perfectly commonplace and convenient type. But I once listened to a goblin story which rather impressed me, said Roosevelt. A grizzled, weather-beaten old mountain hunter named Bauman, who born and had passed all his life on the frontier, told the story to me. He must have believed what he had said, for he could hardly repress a shudder at certain points of the tale. But he was of German ancestry, and in childhood had doubtless been saturated with all kinds of ghost and goblin lore, so that many fearsome superstitions were latent in his mind. Besides, he knew well the stories told by the Indian medicine men in their winter camps of the snow walkers and the specters, the formless evil beings that haunt the forest depths. A dog and waylay the lonely wanderer who after nightfall passes through the regions where they lurk. It may be that when overcome by the horror of the fate that befell his friend, and when oppressed by the awful dread of the unknown, he grew to attribute, both at the time and still more in remembrance, weird and elfin traits to what was merely some abnormally wicked and cunning beast. But whether this was so or not, no man can say. When the event occurred, Bauman was still a young man, and was trapping with a partner among the mountains dividing the forks of the Salmon from the head of the Wisdom River. Not having had much luck, he and his partner determined to go up into a particularly wild and lonely pass through which ran a small stream said to contain many beavers. The pass had an evil reputation because the year before a solitary hunter who had wandered into it was slain, seemingly by a wild beast, the half-eaten remains being afterwards found by some mining prospectors who had passed his camp only the night before. The memory of this event, however, weighed very lightly with the two trappers, who were as adventurous and hardy as others of their kind. They took their two lean mountain ponies to the foot of the pass, where they left them in an open beaver meadow, the rocky timber-clad ground being from there onward impracticable for the horses. They then struck out on foot through the vast, gloomy forest. In about 4 hours reached an open little glade where they concluded to camp, as signs of game were plentiful. There was still an hour or two of daylight left, and after building a brush lean-to and throwing down and opening their packs, they started upstream. The country was very dense and hard to travel through, as there was much down timber, although here and there the somber woodland was broken by small glades of mountain grass. At dusk they again reached camp. The glade in which it was pitched was not many yards wide, the tall, close-set pines and firs rising around it like a wall. On one side was a little stream, beyond which rose the steep mountain slope, covered with the unbroken growth of evergreen forest. They were surprised to find that during their absence something, apparently a bear, had visited camp and had rummaged about among their things, scattering the contents of their packs, and in sheer wantonness destroying their lean-to. The footprints of the beast were quite plain, but at first they paid no particular heed to them, busying themselves with rebuilding the lean-to, laying out their beds and stores, and lighting the fire. While Bauman was making ready supper, it being already dark, his companion began to examine the tracks more closely, and soon took a brand from the fire to follow them up, where the intruder had walked along a game trail after leaving camp. When the brand flickered out, he returned and took another, repeating his inspection of the footprints very closely. Coming back to the fire, he stood by it for a minute or two, peering out into the darkness, and suddenly remarked, "Bauman, that bear has been walking on 2 legs." Bauman laughed at this, but his partner insisted that he was right, and upon again examining the tracks with the torch, they certainly did seem to be made by but 2 paws or feet. However, it was too dark to make sure. After discussing whether the footprints could possibly be those of a human being, and coming to the conclusion that they could not be, the 2 men rolled up in their blankets and went to sleep under the lean-to. At midnight, Bauman was awakened by some noise. He sat up in his blankets. As he did so, his nostrils were struck by a strong, wild beast odor, and he caught the loom of a great body in the darkness at the mouth of the lean-to. Grasping his rifle, he fired at the vague, threatening shadow, but must have missed, for immediately afterwards he heard the smashing of the underwood as the thing, whatever it was, rushed off into the impenetrable blackness of the forest and the night. After this the 2 men slept but little, sitting up by the rekindled fire, but they heard nothing more. In the morning they started out to look at the few traps they had set the previous evening and put out new ones. By an unspoken agreement they kept together all day and returned to camp towards evening. On nearing it, they saw, hardly to their astonishment, that the lean-to had again been torn down. The visitor of the preceding day had returned, and in wanton malice had tossed about their camp kit and bedding and destroyed the shanty. The ground was marked up by its tracks, and on leaving the camp it had gone along the soft earth of the brook. The footprints were as plain as if on snow, and after a careful scrutiny of the trail, it certainly did seem as if, whatever the thing was, it had walked off on but 2 legs. The men, thoroughly uneasy, gathered a great heap of dead logs and kept up a roaring fire throughout the night, one of the other sitting on guard most of the time. About midnight the thing came down through the forest opposite, across the brook, and stayed there on the hillside for nearly an hour. They could hear the branches crackle as it moved about, and several times it uttered a harsh, grating, long-drawn moan, a particular sinister sound. Yet it did not venture near the fire. In the morning, the 2 trappers, after discussing the strange events of the last 36 hours, decided that they would shoulder their packs and leave the valley that afternoon. They were the more than ready to do this, because in spite of seeing a good deal of game sign, they had caught very little fur. However, it was necessary first to go along the line of their traps and gather them, and this they started out to do. All the morning they kept together, picking up trap after trap, each one empty. On first leaving camp, they had the disagreeable sensation of being followed. In the dense spruce thickets, they occasionally heard a branch snap after they had passed, and now and then there were slight rustling noises among the small pines to one side of them. At noon, they were back within a couple miles of camp. In the high, bright sunlight, their fears seemed absurd to the 2 armed men, accustomed as they were, through long years of lonely wandering in the wilderness, to face every kind of danger from man, brute, or element. There were still 3 beaver traps to be collected from a little pond in a wide ravine nearby. Bauman volunteered to gather these and bring them in, while his companion went ahead to camp and made ready the packs. On reaching the pond, Bauman found 3 beavers in the traps, one of which had been pulled loose and carried into the beaver house. He took several hours in securing and preparing the beaver, and when he started homeward, he marked with some uneasiness how low the sun was getting. As he hurried towards camp under the tall trees, the silence and the desolation of the forest weighed on him. His feet made no sound on the pine needles, and the slanting sun rays striking through among the straight trunks made a great twilight in which objects at a distance glimmered indistinctly. There was nothing to break the gloomy stillness which, when there is no breeze, always broods over the somber primeval forest. At last he came to the edge of the little glade where the camp lay, and shouted as he approached it, but got no answer. The campfire had gone out, though the thin blue smoke was still curling upwards. Near it lay the packs wrapped and arranged. At first Bowman could see nobody, nor did he receive an answer to his call. Stepping forward, he again shouted, and as he did so his eyes fell on the body of his friend, stretched beside the trunk of a great fallen spruce. Rushing towards it, the horrified trapper found that the body was still warm, but the neck was broken, while there were 4 great fang marks in the throat. The footprints of the unknown beast creature printed deep in the soil told the whole story. The unfortunate man, having finished his packing, had sat down on the spruce log with his face to the fire and his back to the dense woods to wait for his companion. While thus waiting, his monstrous assailant, which must have been lurking in the woods, waiting for a chance to catch one of the adventurers unprepared, came silently up from behind, walking with long, noiseless steps, and seemingly still on 2 legs. Evidently unheard, it reached the man and broke his neck by wrenching his head back with its forepaws, while it buried its teeth in his throat. It had not eaten the body, but apparently had romped and gamboodled around it in an uncouth, ferocious glee, occasionally rolling over and over it. It had then fled back into the soundless depths of the woods. Bowman, utterly unnerved and believing that the creature with which he had to deal with was something either half human or half devil, some great goblin beast, abandoned everything but his rifle and struck off at speed down the pass, not halting until he reached the beaver meadows where the hobbled ponies were still grazing. Mounting, he rode onwards through the night until beyond reach of pursuit. There is, by the way, a second passage in the book The Wilderness Hunter where Teddy Roosevelt may quite possibly have been describing a personal Bigfoot experience. He writes about how he and a friend were on a hunting trip in the state of Washington. They had hired a Native American to guide them into a remote region. Their guide urged them to avoid a particular area due to some native superstition that hunter-tracker Roosevelt held as utterly preposterous. In any event, old Rough Rider Roosevelt, as was his way sometimes, bullied the apprehensive guide into taking them to this area anyway. They did not find any big game during that trek or other signs, but Roosevelt made a point of mentioning the very strange noises he heard at night while camping there. He did not recognize nor describe the noises, but he did give the distinct impression that they were unusual in his learned experience and found them to be unsettling. Uncharacteristically, Roosevelt did not offer any explanation or speculation about the source of the noises, simply mentioned them and said no more about it. Odd for an author who otherwise went into such vivid detail relative to the animals he observed and hunted. Alright, so there you guys go. The famous President Teddy Roosevelt Bigfoot encounter story that he wrote down in his book, The Wilderness Hunter. What do you guys think of this story? This one, to me, carries a lot of weight with it and a lot of merit since, like I said before, President Roosevelt did not suffer fools. He would call a liar out to their face and he definitely would not put something he did not believe in his book, if you ask me and ask my opinion. So there it is. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. And always remember, guys, until next time, where there is a WILLSTAR, there is definitely a way. And we will talk to you guys later. Alright, so I wanted to bring something else to your guys' attention. I've been having a lot of demand and through the emails to ask about merchandise. People wanted me to come up with some merchandise that they could buy, so I went ahead and did that. If you guys want to, you guys can go check it out. The link will be in the description. I've made a merchandise shelf through Teespring, and like I said, the link will be in the description. You guys can go check it out if you guys need any last minute Christmas ideas. I have t-shirts, I have hoodies, stickers, coffee mugs, things like that. Here, I'll give you a quick peruse of the things I have, and you can get these in all kinds of different colors also. Remember that the colors that you are seeing here are not the only colors of these items. You can get them in almost any color that you like. So I'll just give you a quick glance of this, and you know, there's not a whole bunch of things: stickers, book bags, got tumblers, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, things like that. So if you guys are looking for last minute Christmas ideas, hey, might as well check out some WILLSTAR merchandise, right? I really appreciate that. Viewers were asking for some merchandise that they could wear, or hey, drink coffee out of, or whatever it might be, a hat, you know, a cup, whatever. So I went ahead and did it for you guys. Hope you guys like the merchandise. If you do, once again, think about going and getting some. It's a great gift ideas for Christmas, and can't wait to see you guys wearing it. Thank you. And everybody have a happy holiday and Merry Christmas.